Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Coming out in terrible weather.
Yes. Fun drive in this morning, wasn't it?
I would want to thank all of you for being here, too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so
They just
we
don't
have
wanna
two things
clean
on the
out the
agenda
car.
for tonight. The first is to talk about the BOCES budget, what goes into a BOCES budget, what it is for this year in terms of budget numbers, and how it differs from last year. And then the second, as we start looking at the staffing, is we will get into a preview of what we'll be looking at for the community forum. Just like we did last year as well, you guys will get a sense as to what we're actually looking at. And yes, I am still smiling, so we'll see if I'm still smiling by the end. So, okay, so let's get into...
That was a challenge. Mike Breeden caught it. Okay.
So let's start with this handout here, and then we'll get into the budget at the very end. The budget is actually part of this handout at the end, but I also put it separately as well, okay? So first of all, what is a BOCES? And actually, I'm going to turn it over to Sandy for a few minutes because I know, and we've talked about this for years, and I know that a little bit we're preaching to the choir, but we do also have new people here. There are a lot of different thoughts as to what BOCES is. Some of them are right, some of them are wrong. So Sandy, why don't I turn it over to you for a little bit?
So we have an expert in the field, so he can't answer any questions, and that would be Paul. I'm just kidding, Paul. You know, BOCES is such a vast service that it's worth talking about each year because while each of us has a different role that we play, either as a parent, an administrator, a student, or a board member, we all focus on a piece of BOCES, but there's just so much to it. And I guess when I think about BOCES from a very simplistic perspective, I think about the fact that if you take the state of Virginia, Virginia has county schools. And so they can buy things in bulk, they can work together, they can do things like a big retail place can do. If you take that as an analogous concept to BOCES, we reach out to BOCES on things that we can't do by ourselves, things that would cost us too much to do on our own, things where we don't have enough students or enough staff or enough anything to do on our own. But we also, in saying that, we're looking for a better rate, more of that bulk rate. But we're also looking for a specialty service that we in the House probably could not do, that they will hire because they have more than one district looking for it. So when I think about BOCES, that's where I'm going to go in terms of purpose. But there's also included in those four overriding pieces, support services and instructional. Most times when we think BOCES, as a layperson, we're thinking instructional. Who are our kids that are going to VOTEC? Who are our kids that are going to special ed services? From a perspective of curriculum, we may reach out to BOCES for things like professional development. Lucinda's going to reach out to them for anything to do with tech, our phones, our services. So there's an instructional and a support service side. So when we talk BOCES, I want to make sure that everybody's thinking about the fact of what it does for us, not necessarily what we do for BOCES. BOCES has been able, in the last 30 years, to make itself indispensable to districts, and it wasn't always that way. So that's a good start.
It is, and,
Okay.
and I would actually even add on to that and say BOCES touches every single department here. There's not one department that does not use BOCES services. We did actually have, as recently as last year, Transportation Department last year did not actually use BOCES services. Now they do. So there's not one department that does not use some BOCES services. My department uses BOCES services. And you'll see as we go through in the budget, you'll see everyone is touched by the BOCES services. So BOCES in general is a public education collaborative in New York that functions as an extension of local school districts. The reason I want to read parts of this, they are part of us. They're an extension of us. They provide services for our children. They are not a separate entity in terms, while they're a separate operating entity, they're an extension of services we ourselves are not able to provide. Fair enough statement on that?
So, but fair enough, because in the past couple of months, we've had the BOCES capital project. So as a component district to BOCES, we are as responsible for fixing their buildings as we are fixing our own.
Correct.
And they don't have their own budget to do that. That's an important piece.
And as Sandy had pointed out, there are a lot of things that we would like to do, we're not able to do. If we provided all the services that we actually get at BOCES, our $27 million budget would be astronomically higher. There's no way that we could have staff who could teach some of the classes that our kids actually go to.
So, this is a quiz. Think back 30 or 40 years ago when you had VOTEC classrooms in-house. Can you think of one? VOTEC classes in this building.
We had agricultural classes.
We absolutely did. Springville had it too. Yep. So that would act as a satellite school. So rather than us busing our kids out, they would bus other kids in. Most school districts gave away their BOCES VOTEC components because the overhead was too expensive to keep them up. An auto shop, a CAD shop, a culinary shop, cosmetology. We just either didn't have enough kids or we just couldn't do the overhead on it. Okay.
And I think the other piece with that, too, we were talking about Fidelity. Bless you.
Bless you.
Is that all kids from all of the school districts are learning the same thing in the same way, too, and there's a value to that as well. And I think we all can say that...
Teachers too.
Teachers too, and staffs as well. So again, departments that utilize services, we're all getting the same level of services and support services. And there's a value in that as well, that everyone's receiving the same, whether it's the same type of instruction or the same type of support. And again, there are 721 school districts currently in New York State. All but 9 of them utilize BOCES services. We know that there are the big 5 school districts, New York City, and that's 6, and then we were trying to think of the other 3.
There's a number of districts that never consolidated. So there's a K-8 school district out near Albany, I can't think of the name of it, that it just sits on its own. It raises its own funds, it's not a part of BOCES, it's not a centralized school district to any other district in the city, acts on its own. So it can't be a part of BOCES because it didn't consolidate. So there might be, I know there's one, there might be more than one of those.
And it has been around for a long time. It has evolved as the years have gone. It's been around since 1948. What I want to touch on for a second, and hopefully the superintendent will, is a little bit how it's changed over the years. And again, I think when people think of school, a natural tendency is to go back to your childhood when you were in school, how things were. And BOCES is significantly different than when I went in the 70s, but it is very different. Can you talk a little bit about how things have changed over the
So
years?
those of you who are willing to date yourselves.
I just did myself, so.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
you did, I caught it too. Can probably go back, and with your dad, when you thought of BOCES in the 1970s, you thought of students with special needs. Most people did. And part of that is because BOCES wasn't as embedded in all these services back then. Somewhere around the mid to late 1980s, though, BOCES almost folded. I can't nail it down, but I remember these really, do you remember that, Paul? Really heavy-duty conversations about how is BOCES going to afford itself? How is BOCES going to continue as a service to districts? And they did. They rebranded themselves back in the 80s to be a service provider as well as an instructional component. So, and they did it very well. Now, Tom remembers something from the 2008 or 9 that I
Even
don't
right.
remember.
Somewhere between 2007 and 2010, somewhere in that area, there was definite funding from the federal government, which is cut back, and a lot of competition. There was competition between BOCES and Teacher Center at one point, and I recall, because when I was in Town of Wanda at the time, they had a Teacher Center, and they were talking about the services they were going to provide, and the conversations they would actually have with the governor's office that they needed more funding, and at that point, and
Because the governor's office wasn't going to fund them both.
Correct.
At the level that they were being funded.
Correct. And it really, at that point, was who is going to be able to provide more services and do it more efficiently. And even the Teacher Center was saying, we are not winning that battle. We cannot do it as efficiently as BOCES. BOCES has more reach. Now, I don't know if you remember that during that period of time or not, Paul, of anything along those lines?
Yeah, because the Teacher Center was in the Carrier Building at the time. over
Okay.
there. And it actually was run for a while by, I believe, Joe Winnicki.
Is
He
that
took-
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he took a assignment, special teacher assignment, where he was able to do that for 1 or 2 years. He ran it.
He wasn't actually running it, but he taught their classes for them.
No, he also ran it for 2 years.
Yeah, all right. And then, okay. I took all the classes from him, so when I was there, I was taking computer classes.
Yeah, he was big on iPads, on iPods, but yeah, there was, and it was under a grant that he did that.
yes.
For those, and then the grant disappeared.
That's it.
And he went back into teaching, and now it is still being run. Matter of fact, they rent space from us at the GLP.
Yes.
For, the
Yep.
teacher center for this area is out of the GLP.
Yep, and we love them. We love having them here.
And from my understanding, the funding, though, is not anywhere what it once was
No.
5, 10 years ago.
And they sweat it out every year, too.
They do.
Yeah, they petition to get support every year.
So it definitely has changed, and one of the reasons we wanted to bring that up, again, is when you look at the bottom line dollars that we actually spend, 10% of our budget goes to BOCES services. That is a good chunk of change. So when we talk about that, and people say, well, it's only for those kids. Well, first of all, what are those kids? Second of all, that's not actually a factual statement. So we spend time here because part of the process with the budget advisory team is, as the years go on, and sometimes we do repeat some of the same things, but again, we have new people here, is it's not what some people think it is, and part of our job is to say what it actually is. Is that a fair statement?
It's really interesting.
Okay.
Because in some ways, it can look like a black hole. You know, your BOCES budget goes up. If you were to take a look at the Monroe BOCES budgets for a school district in the North Towns, their budget for BOCES is smaller than a typical Erie 1 or Erie 2. But there's a reason for that. Some of their districts are larger, so they can be more cost-effective in what they bring into their building than we can. They can have a specialist, they can have their own payroll clerk, their own department, where smaller school districts can't really do that. So we'll reach out to BOCES and say, hey, can you come in and help us do this?
And you asked me about BOCES aid, and I did not look that up before, so I'll bring that over to the
But you
community
can talk
forum.
about the
Absolutely. So the way the process basically works is, for most services that are BOCES aidable, you spend the cost in year 1, you get the money back with your BOCES aid in year 2. And what I was just talking about with superintendent, we have multiple aid lines. We have BOCES aid, we have building aid, we have transportation aid. And we've been focusing so much with the capital project, I could tell you that one off the top of my head. I got to look and make sure I'm not mixed up my
So because people won't
numbers.
quote me in numbers, I'll say it. We're somewhere between 74 and 76% aidable. I'm pretty sure.
I just have to look
Yeah.
and see.
And I'm not asking you to add.
I don't want to flip-flop the
But
numbers.
if you take those numbers, basically what it would mean is if we put $1,000 out for something this year,
Yeah, so using those numbers, you take $1,000, you get anywhere between $740 to $780 back the following year.
so you go back out for the service again the next year, you don't have to put the whole amount out.
Now, I think a fair spot to actually mention is, as we talk about the BOCES capital project, when we take a look at our expenditures for that, we spend at the beginning of a year, starting in 2017, and then we'll get our aid back that same year, which is a little bit different than some of the other aids that we actually get back.
You can budget differently.
Well, we definitely budget differently. So we budget for everything all in one year. So you'll see an expenditure for that year and a revenue all within the same year. So generally speaking, what you'll do is look at your BOCES estimate aid on the governor's runs. It's for prior services. This one's a little different. Okay. Okay, so what actually is included? And when you're going to take a look at the two sheets, and we'll go over the two sheets, you're going to see there are many lines that are included. Things like career and tech ed, special education services, again, which tended to be what most people tended to think, technology services, integration of technology. You will see that is a large component of our budget. Those two tend to be the largest proportions of our budget, PPS and technology. So we do an awful lot with that as well. Technical assistance, I think they help almost all of our departments. I can tell you right now, my department actually uses with the financial software. They actually come out here, and when we get ready to roll over all the staff from year to year financially and move them over, it is a process.
Your board policies come out of BOCES services. Labor relations as a school attorney comes out of BOCES. Not your board attorney, but your other attorney.
Literacy program, student workforce program, and again, professional development for staff. And we actually have our staff here, so if you have questions about specific programs, they can talk about the programs. And so as we're going through the budget, if there are things that you're kind of wondering what goes into those lines, they can talk about them as well. Okay. Where are they actually located? We have 4 main ones: Hughes Center, so that is actually in Asheville, Laguitas and Fredonia, Carrier Center right over in Angola, and then
Near
Orms.
Lakeshore.
Yep, right by Lakeshore, and then Ormsby and East Aurora. And Paul, I'm not sure about this. Is Baker Road, it's a satellite location, is that Erie 1 or Erie 2? Because Orchard Park is an Erie 2 BOCES component school district, but is Baker Road considered Erie 1 or Erie 2?
No, Erie 2, because that's where
Okay.
the out-of-school suspension kids go now.
Right.
They used to go to the Carrier, it used to be, but it's now at Baker Road.
But yet, if it's considered part of Erie 2, I have to get special permission from Dave O'Rourke to send my VOTEC kids to Baker Road. We also don't have a component.
There's no VOTEC at Baker Road.
Oops.
Potter Road, yes. Potter Road, yes. Baker, there's alternative ed,
That's the confusion.
yeah.
Okay.
Potter Road.
So I have to get special permission to go to Potter.
Potter
And
Road is-
Potter's part of Erie 1.
Yes, it is.
But yet Baker Road is not part of the capital project reconstruction.
No, because that building is owned by a developer and being rented by BOCES.
That's why. That's the
Oh, that's why
Park.
it's satellite.
Orchard Park sold it
That's the confusion.
last year to a developer, and we're renting space, we rent the entire building.
And that's why it's not part of our capital project.
That's why it's not having
You
capital
get a gold
improvements.
star. You also get a gold star.
And then
Okay.
we also have as well, since there are so many BOCES programs, we have in many districts, there are satellite locations. Lakeshore, I know, is
We
one of them.
talked about that.
Right, right. There are many different spots, so. All right. Looking at that as well, one of the biggest things before we actually look at the budget that I just want to point out, our budget from year to year, we had a large growth last year. For those here who were here last year, we had a very large growth in our BOCES services in terms of the budget. And this year, we have a smaller growth because we can't keep sustaining that level of growth year to year. But one of the biggest items of which you're actually going to see in there is our E-rate project, and I'm actually going to have Lucinda talk about that when we actually get to that. But one of the things I actually do want to point out when we get to that section is the E-rate project. There are 2 components of that. There is the spending portion, and then there's a revenue portion. So what we're looking at and what we, for the most part, focus on when we're looking at our budgets and what voters approve is the spending plan. So we focus on the spending plan. Our revenues, our offsetting revenues are already built in. So when you're going to see tonight the BOCES budget, you're going to see a $300,000 charge in the line for spending. What you don't see in the background is we've already put $220,000 into our revenue expectations for the E-rate project as well. So that's just behind the scenes what you don't actually see. So the program for E-rate is going to cost a net of $80,000.
The 220 is going to be back from the federal government because the rate's federal.
Right.
But the 80, they have assured us we can also put in then for our aid, our BOCES aid. So
Okay.
it's actually
Better.
even
Yep.
less than that.
Which is great.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It was too good a deal then.
So can you talk about what E-rate really means?
Yep, you might as well, since we're here.
Yeah, do it here.
E-rate was a federal program that you all pay for. There's a portion of your phone bills that go towards E-rate funding for the whole country.
Your home phone bills.
The home phone bills, yes. And it's been put into place. I'm in year, I want to say 16 with it. Because I'm planning for next year. So it's changed a lot in the last 2 years, primarily up to this point. What we get as a district, because they already pre-tell us what we can get back, has always been very low because on our E-rate fund, we were always only at like the 40%, which was only the first tier. So since we went to VoIP system, what it pretty much paid for was our emergency lines. We have to have traditional emergency lines to our elevators, to our security system. So there's just a few, we've been able to wheedle that down from 14 to 10 the last 2 years, and then now we're down to 6 lines. Tom and I figured out the other day. So what we get as a district from our very small E-rate is about $2,000 a year. I file for that every year. BOCES came to me in the fall, though, and said that we were ready for this. They were concerned about our wireless infrastructure, which some of you that know here, we bought used from Hamburg about 4 or 5
Well, let's
years
even
ago.
go back for a minute. There has been a change now to the E-rate system. So it is no longer the old E-rate system based on just phones and security. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's it. The change is why it made us like kind of right for this BOCES project, is that now they are really trying to fund telecommunications and the internet and the Wi-Fi's in the districts. So that has become, and the libraries, I should be fair, E-rate is about schools and libraries. So that is their big push. They're shifting their money from the traditional security phone lines to telecommunications, and they're putting more funds towards that, and they're offering it. So instead of getting a 40% rate, that's why we're getting such a good deal back, we're now up to getting a 60% rate back.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it's just, they reconfigured how they figure it, all those things. So it was just kind of like the perfect storm, and it was a perfect time because right after the capital project, I talked to BOCES knowing the new timelines as they started to roll out, is that we probably won't be able to break ground until 2017-ish.
Oh, no, there's not until. We're excited about that.
Yeah, I know.
So I want to put it to the other side of the table and say that we are incredibly excited about that, because if in fact we don't break ground, let's say that we get bids in by contractors by April of 2017, which is a good bet scenario by SCD. What we're being told is that our technology engineer contractors will do that first. They will go, besides the shovel up in the field, okay? So side by side with the shovel up on the all sports field, they will start to lay the wires. And even if it means that we have open hallway ceiling tiles, or they have to replace the tile, push it back, whatever, that they will push that through so that we can have technology by September of 2017. And that's an awesome accomplishment.
I misspoke.
Yes.
But
Okay.
on the side note,
It's amazing.
when we met last week, this project is going to be able to dovetail, and we're going to actually be able to save that $300,000 that was planned in the capital project.
So we can use it
we'll
for
be able to
something
do other
else.
things. So this is,
Oh, that's very
this is
cool.
going to dovetail in. So,
And that's not even including the smart bond, so we still have smart bond funds that
Gonna
we
make
have
that
to.
disco ball though priority.
So how can it be used for something else? Isn't basically anything else?
It can only be used for what is approved in scope in the project. So if the
So like
scope's
we're
in
only
there.
doing 20% of our doors, or we are only replacing so many ceiling tiles, so we can't do something new.
So maybe you can do
But we
30%
can
of your
do
doors
more of
now than
something
20.
that was
Okay,
approved
so
already.
it's not then going to be in addition to more technology?
well, in a way, I mean, like we said, we have a laundry list of things that are scoped in the project, but when
Yeah.
they go to start putting pencil to paper and then dollars to paper,
A
we
year
may
and a
come
half
up
from now.
short and not be able to get this sound system replaced because that was lower on the list. Well, now we've got $300,000 that can be added to that scope.
Or a better quality of some
Sure,
sort.
yeah.
Okay.
Does that explain it better?
You know, I thought you did a great job.
Okay, so
She get a
let's,
gold star?
Who? No, not yet.
Not yet?
Wow.
I'll give you a gold star.
Patty asked a good question.
I'd have given you one. If I had
okay,
one.
so let's take a look at the budget. So these two pieces of paper here. The others are on here as well. They're the exact same thing, but this is in case this went somewhere else. Just, I want to make sure separately you actually have this as well. We normally don't waste paper here. We try not to.
It's a
So.
little bigger on that.
And it is a little bit easier to read on this one as well.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, so much different.
You're welcome, Michael. That was just for you. Okay, so one of the changes we did is dumb as it may sound, is we just changed the terminology. When you used to look at these before, they used to all say BOCES. So I just want to point out when you're taking a look, so 1345, 490, they're all 490 object codes. 490 basically means for in all school world, BOCES. That's the code, the object code 490. So the first four numbers are different departments. So when you see 1345, that is the superintendent's line for purchasing, or I'm sorry, that's the business office line for purchasing. We see 1430, that's personnel. So we can go through these. We generally don't necessarily, unless someone wants to, go through every line by line, but we can show you some highlights of what you're actually going to see. Most things, for the most part, have stayed about the same. So when you're seeing changes in numbers, they're not large changes, they're just service fee changes. So for example, where you might see under BOCES purchasing the first line for 1345, whereas the budget last year was 1895, it's 1909 now. It may be for the exact same services, they just increase their price slightly. So that's part of the reason what you're seeing for just service adjustments on there.
You might also look at the 1430 line, which is the second one down, and say, well, we don't have any personnel from BOCES, but it's the personnel of BOCES that do things for us. So for example, labor relations, which is our attorney, superintendent hearings might be another one, although Jeff's done a good job of keeping those down. Another one might be extended negotiation, extended negotiations, extended superintendent hearings as well. And then on top of that, if in fact we have 3020A or any other type of staff investigations, that would be considered BOCES personnel.
Okay, some of the other lines I think that you would want to actually take a look at and just spend a little bit of time. Some of the largest lines of what you're actually going to see are under 2250. And
I was
that's
just going to ask that one.
2250, and this is exactly why we actually have some of these people sitting in the audience who are actually there.
That's yours, Sean.
So 2250, let me start out by saying, with Mrs. Johnson in the PPS department, for hers, I can tell you now, what you're seeing is not a large increase this year. The year before, there was an increase, but every year what she ends up doing is she takes in, puts out, based on the students who actually go. So having said that, when I turn it over to you a little bit and talk about your program.
Do you want to come over here, Sean? Would you feel better? Maybe next to Kathy, there's a mic in the chair.
Basically, what the cost is, how much did I go up? You said I went up.
From last, let's see,
She went down.
2250.
Down.
You went
You
down.
actually,
20.
It was 1415 to 1516
Yeah,
that you went
yeah.
up, but this year
right,
you're
you went
going
down. So 963 versus 943.
Which is very interesting, because we actually added some extra services in there. But just so you know, under the 2250, it is special ed, but it's also my English second language teacher that I contract through BOCES for our bilingual students. And it's a behavioral specialist that we contract that's under there too, and a transition specialist for our students that are aging out of special ed that needs that support. We utilize one of the teachers so that's a lot of stuff.
Do you have any
Plus,
vision, do you have vision, hearing, any of that too?
that's all in there, yeah, that's why I was gonna go through the students. Besides having the students out in programs, which is North Collins Elementary, North Collins Senior High, Lakeshore Middle, and Laguitas, that's where our kids are. Only 10 kids that we have out of all our special ed populations, so it's a very low number that I have in BOCES. We utilize the hearing service and vision service for our kids that are visually impaired or deaf in the district. So I contract through them to come in. They provide those services too. And as my ESL teacher, we have a part-time ESL teacher that comes in. We have 3 students that receive ESL, English second language. It's all different letters, but it's those students. So the students that I have out in BOCES, only 10 out of them have a population of about 220 special ed. That's a really low number. So
Could you describe a reason why a higher need student might go to
Yeah,
BOCES and where that service could be?
truly, Laguitas, the students that we have in Laguitas are your more physically, developmentally delayed students, the 3 that I have out there. But as Tom knows, I am very adamant about bringing them back to district. I just got to do it at the right time, the right place. They're hitting the older level, and I would like them to be there. If you've heard of a life skills type of program, so they're students with significant needs, but they can still be productive.
But, and I want to touch on that for just a quick second, if I can interject. That actually is a very good point, is when students can come back, and Sean or PPS has brought several students back in, and I think the rumor actually had got out last year that we are pulling back on BOCES services last year. And if you take a look at the budget from last year versus the budget the year prior, you see in actuality that is not even close to reality. Our budget actually did go up last year for BOCES. So I know that rumor actually got out there because some of the kids were coming back, but as a whole, we had...
You know what's funny, and I know this is not my part, it's more Jeff's, but the largest part of my special ed students are in vocational at BOCES. my special ed students, the largest number of special ed students are at vocational. They're not in these programs. They're here and they go to vocational, which is a huge asset.
And vocational does not fall under her code.
No,
It
it
falls
doesn't.
under the instructional codes.
But it's very
besides
important for
providing
my-
a nice, an in-house program for some of the students that might travel to Luguitas, they're not on the bus for an hour and a half.
Right.
They don't have a nurse on the bus.
Right.
What is something else that's different about bringing them back versus sending them out?
I keep telling you, Sandy, what can we do what can they do any different than us? I have the most phenomenal OTPT speech and teachers
We
here.
already have them.
Right, it's integrating into a big building, where that's a small, the special ed part is a small part at Luguitas.
Right, and some of these programs we're paying $160,000.
A kid, yeah.
A kid.
A kid. We are. And the students that I have typically, the other placements are kids with typically behavioral needs that are a little harder for us to handle here, so. But the numbers are low. They're extremely low. I mean, we have a large amount of kids being
So
educated right now.
again, it's a give and take, because while we're paying out something like $160,000 for a student, we get aid back on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So at whatever rate that is, I don't know, 69.
Well, we stack them, and I don't
we
know
get
what
a
our rate
different
is.
rate.
Well, yeah, for those, that's right, for the
But
ones you
that's a-
stack, you don't get BOCES aid, you can't double dip on there. So we get aid, we get aid back, but just in a different format.
But
It's
it's
around
also
70.
that same thing we said, can we do it ourselves? Are we better off to send it out? Is BOCES able to do it better for us? That's what we let Sean decide year after year.
It is, and no matter what anybody, it is one of the toughest decisions that I have to tell a parent, I cannot educate your kid where you're paying your taxes. I have to educate them somewhere else. And I love BOCES. I have worked with them since my Holland days for 28 years, and I like when they do, but I believe in my kids need to be here.
Sean, if
So-
we had the group home come in with kids that had special needs.
We do.
Would they most likely be BOCES special ed service?
The students that I've had in the past in our group homes that we have there have gone to BOCES.
Okay.
Because they're usually, a lot of the students I had were physically and developmentally delayed.
So I think it's important to recognize that there could be a spike in our budget. for
With all
our
the group homes
BOCES
we have.
budget
Yep.
if in fact the group
I have to
homes-
educate them till they're
Right.
21. Yep.
I thought that would then be billed to their home district.
So then, how
No.
does the billing work?
No. Billing-wise, yes. I don't have to pay for them, but I am the CSE responsibility because they're in our
Okay.
district or location. But the state covers all the 100%, it's called
But
a
we still have
stacking.
to-
that
But
we
you
do.
still see, you still
still
see
see
two lines, a
our
spending line
expenditure.
and a revenue line.
Yes, we just had a student last year that was in one of our group homes that we educated for an entire year, until he was moved to another one. We've had, it's about my third student since I've been here that we've had to do. And I had, be creative placements, and that was a very creative situation I had to do last year. to come
And
up with
this,
services.
I would say in this particular line, again, when we're talking $120,000 or $150,000 for a single child, if something happens, you need to have a little bit of room for unknown. So,
They could move in November.
Oh, yeah.
and they do.
Oh, yeah, they
And
do.
Every single year,
They do.
Tom, let's have a conversation. It's
I said,
like,
Tom, I need money. I got a family of 5. I need some money.
and it is what it is, and we need to provide the best services. So every year, when she looks at her budget and what should go in there is just that little bit of room, so if something does happen, we're actually covered for it. And if it doesn't happen, in a best-case scenario, that helps in things like our fund balance or reserves if it doesn't happen. More often than not, we tend to end up using it.
Yes, we do. We always do. But I just want to let you know that, like I said, I have worked with BOCES for a long time, and I am extremely particular where our students go, because we're a BOCES 2 region, so they can go anywhere from Luguitas to East Aurora to wherever, Orchard Park. And I'm very picky, but I'm very proud of the programs, because there's a give and take. And I don't need to address this to Paul, but they know a lot of districts look at how can I save money and bring kids back. And it's not a money issue, it's what the proper services are. And BOCES has some really, really good services for children with special needs. And you just got to know where they're at. And so North Collins is a little, and look at the transportation savings. North Collins isn't that far. This is real close. Instead of my kids going to maybe East Aurora or another district of Orchard Park, East Aurora, Holland had district. We had kids going to Holland for a while. But now we've been able to do it right over there. So that's it. I don't see any other increases except we put that behavioral specialist in because we have an increase in numbers of children with autism in our GLP program next year, and I could use some help.
And you know that because they're coming in from the league?
They're coming in from the league, and they're our children. Yep. And we could use some help, having somebody come in with some of the behaviors that we have.
Sean and I actually had an intriguing conversation this morning about getting Head Start into Eden. Because what we're seeing is the kids that are very, very young, who have been home, who come into our daycare or come into our preschool already having, and Jen sees it too.
She
And being
knows.
able, so Sean's going to do some research on Head Start.
Yeah, we could really use a Head Start program out here. We really could. For many things, to help the families with the nutrition, the other issues that we're dealing with. I've learned a lot from our CPS worker, our Child Protective Service worker, but I want to look at the other ends to try to be more preventive instead of reactive.
And offer programs to the
They offer programs too, and we did it in Holland when I worked there. We started a program, and it was hugely successful because a lot of people in those, it's income eligible, and the kids that really need it don't get into your Discovery preschools or your, whatever. They can't afford it. The families can't afford it. So I would like to really push for that next year.
So it's possible that the extra wing that we have at GLP, we'll check on the regs on that, could be not only a wraparound daycare, but could also be a Head Start. And then we would be looking at
Right, well,
really young kids.
Yeah, I want the babies. I want to give them to me
We
when
do
they're little.
too, because when we get nonverbal 4-year-olds in, Jen sees them all the time. Where do you go? What do you do?
And Jen, they're coming like crazy out here. It's just, our numbers have tripled this year in preschool. Tripled. It's just a lot of them.
And Lucinda already talked about technology in terms of the change, and you saw the E-rate was the largest change there. Does anyone have any instructional questions as to what we're looking at instructionally for next year?
Can you define the truth?
So for any, student-based, non-special ed students,
So I would go back and I would say to you that we work really hard as a district to put kids in programs that make the best sense. Sean talked about it from a special ed perspective. We mean the same thing when we look at kids academically. If the best place for them to go is to vocational, and we don't offer a comparable program, we will put them in vocational if they want to go. So I think that there has been a lot of conversation, at least since I came here, about Eden pulling back on BOCES or Eden pulling back on VOTEC. There may have been some truth to that conversation back in 2013 when I came, that the district really wanted to pull back more of its kids in BOCES. I would suggest to you that the phrasing is different. It's we want our kids to be in the best programs that are available to them, whether it be here or BOCES. And if we can offer a comparable program in-house, and they're choosing to go to BOCES because they're bored here, then we're not offering a good program. And that's different than saying that we want to bring our kids back. And I'm saying this because I want the misconception and the misunderstandings to go away. BOCES is incredibly VOTEC, powerful program for some students. So.
as said, it's about 10% of our budget, so we wanted to make sure that we took time to actually devote to it. In years past, I don't think BOCES ever really was gone through with every line. Last year, we did it with every single line, and we didn't spend as much time, so we want to give it its due. Any other questions before we move on to the next portion? Okay. Yes.
A little clarity with the vocational. I think maybe some of the confusion is when departments are trying to develop the best educational experiences in the building, it's the idea that we kind of know what the kids are interested in, and it seems like we're trying to roll programs that would, for lack of a better word, compete with the vocational programs. So, are we still trying to do that?
Give me an idea of what you mean.
The technology department, investing in a program where, like currently right now, they can't get the same certification they get over at vocational, but they could get the best of both worlds. They could be getting the skills, and they could get a high school diploma, maybe a regents diploma here, type, and get vocational skills.
So, for the most part, years ago, some of those satellite schools, like Springville Agriculture, we had an ag, went away. And when that happened, the programs that the school district started to offer were more introductory. Perhaps they didn't come with a CTE instructor, they didn't come with a license. We don't, even if we offered any type of cosmetology programs in this district, the kids couldn't walk away with a cosmetology license. They can do that through BOCES. Same thing with health services. If they want to go on to be an LPN or an RN, they can take an exam through BOCES that we can't do here. So we can't do it cost effectively. We don't have enough of our own students to do it. We're located so close to Carrier, there would be no reason for us to be a satellite school or for BOCES to accept us being a satellite school. Where I think what has changed in the last 30 years is an acceptance by America that having kids with a hands-on trade is more valuable than a 4-year college degree in some cases. But you look back over the last 20 years and there was this push to get kids into 4-year colleges, but they don't have any jobs. Okay, so we will not, and honestly can't, create a competing program that pulls kids out of a BOCES program. And the reason that I say it that strongly is because if Eden were to create a program that closed a program at BOCES down, we would be required to hire their BOCES instructor. Okay, so there is no push for us to offer every BOCES program here that's VOTAC. What we offer are introductory programs or programs that are different than what BOCES offers. So we will never do a culinary program the way BOCES does it. We're not going to offer an aquaponics program the way BOCES does it with fish and fish tanks. So we can't afford it. We can't do it.
And it's not, you do not get COSA even if you start a program.
Right.
Any instruction.
So we wouldn't get any aid back. We can't coaster it if we were to do it, is what Paul is saying.
If we're able to develop a career technical education with a CTE cert, like family consumer science department, where you create the internship opportunity, the course where they get an internship. And if you teach a certain course that they require in a 5-course sequence, they could pick up their math and business class. They could pick up their psych from our history department. They could pick up their family consumer science credits.
Sure.
Family consumer science.
Sure.
Are we still going down that path?
We haven't changed any path. Okay, we haven't changed a path. But there will always be students who will be better served in a vocational program than they will be in-house. There just always will. What we're trying not to have is kids bored here and just saying, I want to get in the car and go to BOCES half the day to be with my friends. That's what we don't want to do. And I do believe 4 or 5 years ago, there was some impression that there were students that were doing that. So we've spent a concerted effort trying to look at our special area programs here. To help?
Yeah, I just think, I'm excited for family consumer science, especially with being able to coordinate taking courses in all the other departments.
Thank you,
And
sir.
be able to get a kid, they'd be in this building taking the regular courses, but they could pick up a 5-course sequence and get a CTE in family consumer science. With a lot of the stuff that's already happening in-house.
Which may or may not be comparable to a program that's already being offered by BOCES.
Right.
Okay.
But along the same career technical, get out in an internship and get some skills outside of this.
You could do it with a CAD program.
Yeah, similar.
Okay, other BOCES questions before we move on now to the budget status? Staffing. Okay, we have heard from every department at this point. We've also looked at BOCES. So let's now see, where are we at? What does it all mean? Okay, so let's start by looking at some of the big changes from the 15-16 school year. Number one, we've had a retirement of a 6th grade teacher. We've had a retirement of a 2nd grade teacher. We've had a retirement of a reading teacher and a retirement of a music teacher. So that helps out in terms of if you replace them, it's with a lower dollar amount, generally speaking, than obviously the first, or you may not replace them at all, just depending on where you're at in terms of program.
And it also might give us an opportunity to take a look at the program and could we do the program differently. That's always an opportunity when you have a retirement.
The other big change that has actually hit us, which is different from last year's, with the GEA. If you recall, at the first community forum, we talked about the GEA, where we started the year. We started the year with $375,000 still left in our GEA. Under the governor's proposed budget, he has already proposed giving back to us $132,000. That still leaves remaining in the GEA $243,000. Now, as we've talked about definitely already, that the Senate has said they will not pass a budget without seeing GEA fully restored. I'm also hearing now that the Assembly feels the exact same, that they do not want to pass a budget, which is great, without the GEA being restored. It is great. There's a downside for that in my mind. Last year, when we saw our additional money come back in March, we saw over $300,000. And right now, if I'm a betting man, and we put more in the budget last year expecting to come in, and we're not going to reach our revenues, so we overprojected our revenues this year, and we are not meeting our revenues. So I would not, and we're okay for this year, but I would not overestimate our revenues for next year. So when I take a look at this, and I see $243,000 still left in the GEA, I think we'll get that back. I do think that will come. This year. But what I also think that I would hear if I were a betting man is that the Senate and the Assembly say, you know what? We got rid of the GEA. We're done with that. We have done our share for you guys. And that is a great thing, and people are going to be very happy.
But what you won't see, it won't be on the front page of the Buffalo News, is the loss of the foundation aid.
I don't think we're going to see a change in our foundation aid, because I think they're going to all take credit, and rightfully so, of getting rid of the GEA.
You think you won't get an increase, or you won't see a change?
I think where we're at right now with the governor's budget pretty much will be where we're going to stay in foundation aid. I don't think we're going to see a big change in the foundation aid. So they got rid of one, and then they're going to say, I believe, that next year we'll worry about foundation aid next year. We've got rid of one. And some districts benefit. Orchard Park, I know, is slated for $1 million increase with GEA if they get it all back. In fact, they're actually saying, well, no, I won't say what they're saying. It's not my place to say what they're saying. They're up for getting $1 million back. We would not have the same effect that they actually would. It is a less back for us than it was last year, and it's great. Anything back definitely helps, but I wouldn't say, you know, I would go above the 243. But that's something for us that actually does affect us on this budget as we move forward.
Question.
Yes.
Could they adopt a budget that actually restores less of any of the categorical aids than what the governor has proposed?
No, the governor's budget is, generally speaking, always a base.
That's the lowest.
I'm not aware of it ever going lower than what the governor's actually proposed.
That's a good
Didn't they do a bit of a shell game last year, though, where they said they gave us more in one line and
And they did.
took...
Yeah.
And that's what they didn't put in the Buffalo News.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what they did. I think it probably will be a little bit more transparent just this year to say, hey, look at us, how great we are. So I don't know if they're going to necessarily need to play that game, but you're right, they did. Yep. So, again, if we can keep pushing our senators and assemblymen to look at not only GEA, but as well the foundation aid, that would be great. In fact, there was an article that just came out today that talked about Governor Cuomo 10 years ago talking about the foundation aid, as well as when he was comptroller back then, as well as a comptroller now, and him talking 10 years ago, and both of them saying 10 years ago that they felt the foundation aid formula was a very fair formula. And in fact, fully funding it is right, and it goes along with the court case from years ago. And now their comments are almost flip-flop 10 years later, saying that, no, you know what, hey, what you're getting right now is actually fair. So, but very different from what they said 10 years ago, that you are entitled to that full funding. So it just is, unfortunately, as they say, it is what it is. So the next line, this right here is our budget for the coming year. And as I said, you're getting a preview of what's going to be talked about at the community forum, because as the budget advisory team, you guys, we try to make sure that you guys see it before it actually goes out to the entire community, so you're aware as well and not taken by surprise. So at this point, all told, we're going, if you look at the very bottom, from 26,994,111 to 28,214,680. It's a difference of $1,220,000. It is a 4.5% increase. That right now is a very high increase. That's more, we usually end anywhere between 2.5%, somewhere around there. That's typically about where we're at. But again,
Put that into dollars?
so if you look at 1% of the budget, it's $269,000. So multiply that by 2, you're talking you're talking somewhere around $600,000 more than last year. So if you take the 26,994, you add $600,000, that gives you an idea of roughly where we should be ending. Because to go out to voters with a .93 tax cap and say, hey, we're going to increase our budget 4.5% is a lot. So on average, we end up anywhere between 2.5%, somewhere around there. So let's take a look at some of these lines and what makes up the budget. Just in a nutshell, we have salary, equipment, supplies, BOCES, debt service. We have 2 different lines with that, performance contract solely, benefits, and then we have transfers due to other funds, which include the rest of our debt service. And we have an additional items line, which I'll talk about in a second. So those are the categories. One by one, if you take a look at them, salaries, they're up about 2%. That is really not out of line with what you would see with typical increases from year to year. 2.15 is not bad, it's about average. And that is with the new ETA contract being settled and actually in place. So all told, not too bad. Equipment, those are just sheer equipment purchases, anything with a $500 or more value. The only difference is one department asks for one piece of equipment. That's about all. Supplies, this is an area that we can actually look at. That is going up 3.18%, but that's an area that we will be investigating.
So the piece that Tom is saying is that we're not done. So
No, this 28,214 is a first blush. It is not the final blush. So when we look at that, again, if we were done, we'd have no budget gap.
And then you could approve a budget. So that's not clearly
We're not there yet.
happening. So we've come together as an administrative council a number of times to take a look at it. We're coming together again next week to see what we can look at. What Tom is saying, this is one area we can look at. What he's suggesting is that supplies is an area that we can try to grab some money out of. So what, as he goes down here, he may or may not find another one where we can grab it. But that's ours to bring to you at not just the community forum, but at the March 16th board meeting. So at the March 16th BAT and board meeting, we will give you as close as we can possibly get to a closed gap. That's our call.
We are by March 16th?
Well, we're going to try to get
Okay.
as close as we can, because what
That's right.
your hope is that the board will adopt
Yeah.
the budget when?
Well, last year you adopted it in April at the April 7th. So even though we came close in the March meeting, really what we did is we then went back and then we tweaked it some more. So while we weren't done in the March one, April is really when we were done enough that the board felt comfortable with saying, yes, we're good with that final
So
spending
most
plan.
likely, there'll be a special board meeting somewhere between April 7th between the March 16th and the April 7th meeting, so you can get another look at what you really want or what you really don't. You know the date? April 5th is, April 5th, Tuesday, April 5th.
Oh, there you go.
Can I ask you a question on the salary line?
Yes.
So it's 2.15% difference. Is that more?
It is more.
Okay. Well,
We went from 13.4
retirement
to
of
13.7.
these teachers, wouldn't that be helpful in bringing that a little bit down?
It did help.
It
We
helped a
probably
lot.
would have been above 214 had they not retired. And we have a
So
few
it's
retirements
staff,
every year.
it supports staff too.
Yep.
It's not just teachers.
So it's
So that
all,
number then could go up, too.
well, every year it could definitely go
Well,
up.
no, I mean, could still go up.
Oh, and that's a very good point that you make, Mike, and I do want to say,
Start too, Michael.
you say these numbers and you see these, this is a living document. This changes, and it could change every single day. So if someone comes in tomorrow and says, hey, Tom, guess what? We're adding an extra,
Special ed teacher.
a special ed teacher, or we're adding
An OT, PT.
Any of that sort of stuff. This is as best as the good information that we have at that point in time. If it changes, you're right, you can see a change in any of these lines, and it does. And it happened through last year's process, it happened through the year before process, and that's just as you tweak things, you will actually see that. So it could go up, it could go down. The
I
sal-
could have 20 more kids enrolled in kindergarten.
Absolutely.
You could.
And you might need a new teacher.
Correct.
This is, 2.15% is a really nice place to be.
It is,
Good spot.
and given the fact, again, that we have all of our new contracts for teachers, CSEA, confidentials, everyone in place.
Except for
administrators, but everyone in place, this is not bad, because, again, generally speaking, with new contracts, you have a little bit higher increase. So those retirements definitely did help, without a doubt. So that's a good point as well. Again, moving down, you see a 4.8%, well, let's go to BOCES. We talked about that as well. That increase primarily is at $300,000 from E-rate, so of the 466.
So that'll come back.
But we get that back in the revenue.
And the revenue line, correct. You don't see it
And
here.
that's such a good conversation, Don, for us to talk about for a minute, because this is something Tom consistently says to me, you can't marry the two.
You can't. They are.
I want to.
Yes, everyone wants to. I get it, but they are two separate things. So when we
Because
take.
while I'm being charged for an expenditure over here, especially on a tax cap, I'm saying I'm getting it back, so why should I have to count it?
So the most frequent question I get, especially from you, a lot of administrators, is, well, why can't you just say, if it's 300 and 220 back, why can't you just say 80 and just be done with it? Because for accounting reasons, you can't do that. I mean, you have to show it on both sides of the ledger. So here's a true expense, here's a true revenue. So we get that one a
So
lot.
we take a big hit on the tax cap there.
It does, you're absolutely.
Absolutely.
And if we were
Well,
only-
well, no.
If we were even quoting less than 80, because you said that would be
State aid back.
COSA,
He-
aidable.
I know what he's saying. So just give an example, because I know what you're saying. Tom's going to explain it differently, but I know what you're saying.
Because we have to list it like that, instead of listing our true expenditure, then
It looks worse.
It looks worse when we do the average for the tax cap.
Not really. Here's why. So let's just say, let's use it as an example, 300,000 expenditure, but let's say we're going to get all 300,000 back.
Okay.
And you're saying, okay, well, our expenditures are going up $300,000, doesn't that affect the tax cap? No, because the tax cap is what the taxpayers are paying. So if we're getting another revenue source separate than what the taxpayers are paying, they offset each other. So if it's a 300, your spending can go up 300,000 as long as you have another revenue outside of taxpayers to pay for that 300,000. That whole 300,000, it doesn't affect the tax cap if you fully cover that amount. The difference, that 80,000, affects the tax cap.
Right, which is less because of
Yes.
COSA. But when you throw that number up at the town, or at the forum, the community forum, 15%,
Remind me to explain how that doesn't affect the tax cap. Only the 80 will affect the tax cap.
well, even less than 80 because it's COSA, right?
Well, but that's the following year.
Also, you can't
So
use
it
because-
doesn't help us out this year.
because
It's,
we use it as income stream the following year.
Yeah.
Just like other COSA we use as income stream.
correct.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing you need to do is when you flag that at the community forum, it's really 5.7%. If you put it in layman's terms,
Oh, if you took the 80,000 and did it that way?
well, you take the 300,000.
You're backing it out?
You back it out, and that will make people feel more realistic in regards to a percentage increase.
I can show what the percentage is, and I can put in
Right,
parentheses.
so just, you know.
Yep.
Because it's not in accounting
Yep.
terms, but it's in real, actual terms.
Right.
Yep, I could put that in.
And you see 5.7%, it's not as
Well,
bad as
but it-
15.
I wouldn't do that for this reason only. If you did it here, you would have to do it on every line we get money back for. And we get money back from a lot of, a lot of these different lines that we actually get money back. So the
But
PPS
you could
department gets
show it
money
here
back.
as an example.
I can show it as an example
This
and
could
want
be
to
a
say.
talking point.
Yeah, it is a good talking point. I wouldn't do it with every line
It's a
because
sizable number.
Yeah.
it is
And
a
it's an
size.
anomaly. It
Yeah.
looks like it's
Yep,
off.
absolutely.
I think it's a great talking
Yep.
point. And it allows you to have a talking point there.
Yep,
Okay.
okay.
I was trying to get to, yeah.
And we could show what it would be with the
Right,
offset.
true.
Okay. Benefits are going up 4.8%. We have actually, and that's primarily, that is healthcare. At this point, we have been told that our healthcare is 11% increase. And he said the best we might be looking at is 8 or 9. But again, officially, I am told 11, so that is what's in there. And that is causing a $309,000 increase. That is a large increase that we're actually looking at.
But there's no reason for it.
Well, you know what, it's interesting, as we take a look at this, we had a business officials meeting today where we're all talking about our deficits, and no one had any smiles on their faces, quite honestly. As I said, I'm smiling right now, but it certainly wasn't this morning. And we're all talking about it, and I asked a question, because we had a decrease last year, and we had a 0 the year before, which was great for this district. And when they said 11%, I said, can you tell me what in a basically freeze on CPI, 0.93 is basically nothing. So when we're talking basic freeze when it comes to the cost of living, and our claims are good, and I asked those questions before I actually made the statement. I said how are our claims and all that, and excellent. So if we're talking excellent claims and basically a freeze on CPI, how can we be looking at 11% increase? It just doesn't make logical sense. And I have my own personal opinion, and I'll give my personal opinion here. I don't mind, but again, it's my personal opinion. It's not the Director of Finance opinion. My personal opinion is we had 2 very good years of 0 and negatives. And personally, I do believe that now they are trying to even that out and with a larger increase. Can I prove that? Absolutely not. And that's why I said that is my personal opinion, not the Director of Finance opinion. So I need to clarify that. That being said, NY44, which is a large health trust, I heard...
We don't have it.
We don't have it, but I heard several of the business officials around the table said they were having meetings with NY44 today, and they themselves they're saying that they are looking at about a 10% increase. So we're not much different than other trusts out there. People who were...
That's a trend.
That's a trend. When I asked other people who were in our same situation, so I asked John and Peter at BOCES, I said, what's your increase? And they said 3%. Now, they're in the same consortium that we're at. I asked someone else in our consortium, we're at 3%. Well, why are you guys at 3% and we're at 11%? So we're still working through that process. In fact, we're trying to see if we can chop it out to lower the cost. I think that's too high. But, again, we live with what we actually have at this point in time. So when you take a look at that, all told, that brings you down to the subtotal of 4.25%. There are still some additional items we're working through as an administrative team of things that are needed within this district, which come to about $73,000. We're still having those discussions. We are not done with those. Again, we're working through that process. We are meeting next Monday to go over that again. But again, that brings you to 4.52%. Go to the next page. And again, I was sitting with the superintendent and I was showing this to her earlier, and I said, I do have some good news in all this gloom and doom. And she didn't necessarily think so, and I said, thanks for bursting my bubble, but I was actually pretty happy to point out where we were last year versus where we're at now. So if you take a look at where we're at right now, appropriations, 28,214. Revenues, 26,053. The difference, $2.16 million.
What's that?
That's our budget gap. That is our current budget gap. If you go to the next page, at this point last year, what were we looking at? Appropriations, 28,391. Revenues, 25,690. Our budget gap last year at the same time was $2.7 million. Now,
That's where I was supposed to be excited. I just want you all to know.
I was excited. We are in a better position at this point than we were last year. We're still $2 million in the hole. Don't get me wrong.
We cut last year, we can't cut again.
Thank you, Paul. That's the problem.
Well, that's
So,
yeah.
I mean,
It was all on sale.
we can't redo what we did last year.
That's true. No.
The squeeze just gets
So
tight.
It gets
we're
tighter,
still-
it does get tighter, yes.
Okay.
But we're not at 2.7. At least we're not seeing the reverse. We're not seeing 2.1 last year and 2.7 this year, because that's a
Because
worse
that would
place to be.
even worse. See, he's being
Right,
positive.
Right.
I try to be an
Still
optimist.
smiling, so
Yeah,
that's good.
that's
Yeah,
what I
no,
wanted to.
I've had a couple
But
nights where I've
but I
gone
think
home
an
and
important
might have had a
point to
drink.
put in there,
So-
and Paul, you caught it right off the bat, is you can't take away what you already took away. So we've been taking away since 2008. So you just keep taking away, and what you end up with are buildings that are falling down and buses that aren't running and programs that aren't functioning. But on top of that, too, we can't even go out at a 2.2% like we did last year.
No, it's less than that.
Or 0.93. So there's a huge difference to me in that, too. And so I feel the burden of that, knowing that we are on the cusp in this district of offering fabulous programs. Kathy talked about one, our BOCES programs, letting our kids go, our special ed kids, our technology, things that we've promised in our capital project. But we have a 0.93% increase, which equates to about what in dollars?
Oh, we were talking somewhere
260. So
260,000.
260,000 extra dollars to use for the year. I don't know what that is.
When we have a $2 million.
Right.
Correct.
So I'm trying to see it, and I didn't mean to burst your bubble.
It's okay. So it's a process. Well, we're working through the process. So if you take a look at things that we're actually looking at, we've already talked a little bit about some of the stuff. So
Now,
both,
but this is not taking any money like we did last year out of reserves.
no, correct. And I want to actually talk about that a little. So we started in the process last year of 2.7. We ended up saying that we're going to take $1.1 million out of reserves to close that gap. The rest of it we did with other reductions. When more money came back, we ended up reducing that 1.1 to $700-some thousand. But what that means is, and again, we increased that from the year before, but every time you do that,
We take more out of savings.
well, it's not that you just take more out of savings, that's
Yeah,
where
less
you
than
start your
savings.
deficit the next year. So you start the deficit, no, so you start the deficit at 1.1 million. So when you start the process this year, we started $1.1 million in the hole. It actually went down to 700 some because we reduced it. But that was our starting deficit. So every time you increase the use of your fund balance and reserves, you're right, you're lowering your reserves, but you're increasing your deficit at the start.
Using the numbers of 1.9, we actually are starting at zero, because you said that equates out to about $600,000, which would zero out the $700,000 that we took out of.
I'm not following his math. I am not following that math. We'll have to sit down and take a look at that one, but,
I like the zero, but
wow.
You said that our tax increase, if it passes at 1.9, will equivalent out to about $600,000 more that we're getting from the.
No, our tax increase is 0.93.
0.9.
And that's about $260,000. So that's already in the revenues. That's already in that number there that you're seeing.
already-
Oh, that's in there. Oh, yeah, so we don't hold off on that. We put that revenue increase in there. Correct. So that's there.
Never mind.
I'm like, where's he going with that one?
Thought I had him.
I like
I thought I had him checkmate on that one.
George Bush fuzzy math here.
So
let's
looking
go
at
to
this,
this.
it is our starting point. So you're right, we haven't looked at fund balance and reserves. I personally would advise, we don't want to go much more over that because that's your starting deficit next year, but we'll have those conversations as we go along. So again, what are we looking at? We minimize BOCES proposed expenditure increases, and we did. As I said, if you looked
But
at the
we're gonna
increase
look
last
some
year,
more.
we are going to look some more, we're not done. We're looking at this point, we had the sixth grade retirement of not replacing that person. A second grade retirement, we would replace that person with a lower cost individual.
So just there, if you just take a breath for a second, what that does is it puts us right on those two in the line of what we said last year, is that given our declining enrollment, that we would not replace a fourth grade classroom, leaving our classrooms in the fourth grade somewhere around 22, Lucinda? Around 22. So that does not change the path that we were on. Last year, we cut a third grade. This, replacing one but not the other, would not replace a fourth grade. So we would have 4 third grades, 4 Ks, 4 1s, 4 2s, 4 third grades, 4 fourth grades, 5 fifth grades, 5 sixth grades. Okay? That makes sense, the way I said it? Okay.
Music department, we have a retirement as well, and replacing that position, looking at something less than 1.0 that is actually being investigated. And then we also have one AIS RTI person who's retired. They actually were in reading section.
And you already approved that
Yeah,
person?
replaced, yes.
For the music,
Yes.
replace less than one FT, what's that acronym used for full-time?
Full-time equivalent. So it's a 1.0 full-time equivalent. It'd be less than a full
So the question is there a
one.
different way to do the program?
Well, I'm just saying, they did make one, I didn't understand.
Yep.
Yep.
But that's what it means.
Absolutely, thank you.
So
And we talk
It's
acronyms, so.
an opportune time to take a look at doing something creative.
And Kathy, that's a good point. If we talk acronyms, I try not to do that, so if you hear me, thank you. And then, again, we already talked about this controlled use of fund balance and reserves. So we're looking at all that. The administrative team, I will say, I think so far has done a yeoman's job of, that's probably why it's not 2.7, which is probably why I'm happy now. They've already done a lot. So looking at that, that's where we're right now. The next community forum is on the 12th at 10 o'clock. It's in the library. Questions?
What I would say to the BAT team and to the board is that tomorrow, the administrators will begin to have conversation with those staff members that are low on the seniority list, just to let them know that we still have some budget gap to make up, and that because they're low. This is not a new process. We do this every single year. We don't have scheduling done, we don't know, but we just, out of respect for people, want them to know that these conversations are occurring. So that will be tomorrow. What I would also add on that is that for anybody who owns a business, I'm sure that they understand the value of what I just said, because basically what that means is that you come in September with a refreshed and inspiring and a motivated look at teaching, and then every February or March, someone says to you as the lowest seniority teacher, oh, by the way, right? By the way. And so what happens to the morale and the atmosphere in a district or in a business from February until June, because it's not like they turn in their keys the day after. They stay from February until June, wondering first what will happen with the budget, what will happen with the governor's budget, then what will happen with our budget, and if in fact they just know the program's being cut, they stay with us till June. And that is a difficult atmosphere for school districts to endure every single year. But that's what we're doing every year.
I think we're the only business that if someone is told in February or March and work an additional 3 months, you typically don't see that in most
Yeah.
for-profit
No,
corporations.
they give them a severance pay and let them go.
Or they walk a guard up to you and say, please clean out your desk and leave. So we ask these people to stay motivated for the rest of the year, and that says a lot about them.
And I will, this is my personal opinion, but it also is my opinion as a superintendent. I find it to be a travesty that there is a surplus in the state of New York in terms of the money that they're keeping in GEA that could just simply come back. There is absolutely no reason to hold that for another year. There's none.
Yeah.
We're talking millions, if not more than millions. So I don't understand it. Anyhow, Barbara, we need your help as a district clerk. I would like Mike Burns, as board president, to make a proposal, to make a motion for a proposal to go into executive session. Do we have to go into regular session first?
Okay.
But before we do that, let's just do questions.
On this,
and
what
answers.
is, what does this equal? What is the dollar amount?
In terms of dollars, I would have to break that out and actually get the, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Just roughly?
3.1.
Let's see, so for the sixth grade retirement, you're talking about, with benefits, $90,000 to $100,000. You're talking about, yep, around there. Yeah, maybe a little more.
Because it's a 39-year teacher.
A second grade, and again, I'm taking names out of it. So if you assume a teacher, a high-paid teacher, is about $100,000 with benefits, and it changes with every person, whether they take health care or not. You're trying to figure out how much we're taking out of the budget. So $100,000 out of the first one. The second one, you have $100,000. You're replacing that with someone who is making about 67, somewhere around there.
Benefits.
With benefits. The third one, the music, I guess it just depends on where you end up on that one. And what's the fourth one, Mike? Can't
We're
say.
talking about $200,000 roughly saved.
The reading retirement replace, same thing. So you're saving 100, you're spending 67. So you're saving roughly 33 on the, for each one of those.
175,000 roughly.
Roughly. And some of those, like, I could tell you right now, the first, the second, and the fourth are already in the budget numbers in terms of what you've already saw.
So they're already removed.
They're already removed.
Number 1,
Yeah,
Poor Paul.
they're already removed.
So you leave nothing for us.
Oh, no, we're not done. No, there will be more. Don't worry about that. So
We'll let you
those are some of the areas where we've been looking at and I've already, I mean, so, but they're already in the budget numbers.
So the music program will be one that will come
Right.
your way?
Yeah, that's not fully
Okay.
in there yet because we
If,
don't know the end.
any more BOCES type of cuts that we think we can make, supplies and materials, there'll be approximately $300,000 worth of things for you to decide.
They'll cut the board budget again, Mike.
The board budget.
Salary budget for the
Pretty
board.
cut.
I should tell you, though, because
gonna
at the
start
last
paying
BAT
again.
meeting, I told you that, at the last board meeting, I told you that the NISBA meeting is in Buffalo next year and that we were budgeted by about $3,000 for it. That will be something that'll come your way to see if you want to cut. Just letting you know. So maybe 2 people will go instead of 4 or 5, or 1, or nobody. But that will come forward, too.
Where's the school board association?
It's going to be in Buffalo
Buffalo
next year, the
next year.
convention. The one you went to New York City for.
Oh, it's going to be in Buffalo? That'll save a lot of money.
Yeah, it'll save more if nobody goes, but it'll save more, it'll save more than going to New York City. So that'll be a decision for you, so you will get to play. Okay?
Other questions?
Okay. As a bat, we thank you.